times in the top 25 poll. Kendall, sorry about that. We had to reconnect with a little bit better audio. So the Dale Bonner played more minutes, right, than anyone could have ever thought last year. Is that what we're now seeing from him this year?
Absolutely, Smokey. I don't know why the AirPods have betrayed me, but maybe Apple has betrayed us all for the final time, and I can switch to a new brand. I think on that front, yeah, he played way more, Smokey. Had to play a lot against North Carolina last season, but I think he's now clearly Baylor's fourth guard this season. He's handling backup point guard roles. He can shoot 75% from three on day one, and he just looks so comfortable taking three today that you feel really good. If, let's say, one of Baylor's guards has an injury again, we certainly don't want that this season, but you feel really good if Dale Bonner has to be a 30-minute-a-night guard. And I think if Dale Bonner's your fourth guard, it's kind of like 2 years ago where Adam Flagler was the fourth guard. It's just a ridiculous amount of riches for Baylor's offense once again.
Yeah, Kendall, you can't put too much on a game against Mississippi Valley State. I get that. But the way that this team has rotations and the way that they respond to hot streaks reminds me of a couple years ago where 2 years ago, if they got you on an 8-0 run, if you were down 8, then that game was over. This team might have to get you down 12, but it feels a little bit the same way, doesn't it?
I agree with that, Paul. Clark Kellogg calls it spurtability, where that team can kind of go on those runs, and you just feel like, okay, when's Baylor's run going to come? So if they stay within kind of striking distance, Keontae George is going to be a bucket. Didn't shoot the best today, still played great defense. LJ Cryer only goes 3 of 8 from 3 today, but he made a couple that he was well contested on. They're going to be a team that there used to be that adage that when Baylor was going to Allen Fieldhouse, they'd say, we got to be at least 15 points better than them because we feel like the refs are going to give them some calls. No matter where you're playing Baylor, you can play them in Las Vegas, you can play them in Waco, you can play them in Siena. You're going to have to be 15 points better than them to feel like you can survive an unbelievable barrage from 3. They're just that good this season.
Kendall, you mentioned Keontae George there. What did you think of the batch of newcomers, Bridges and Lohner as well?
Craig, I thought they looked pretty good today. I thought Lohner exceeded my expectations. King McClure on the broadcast kept talking about how he has incredible athleticism and looked really good this summer. And then Jalen Bridges was pretty unselfish all day, did a nice driving with the ball, which often at West Virginia he wasn't putting the ball on the floor quite as well. I'd heard this summer that his passing had really impressed the staff. So once he'll get the opportunity when maybe teams key in a little bit more on George, Flagler, and Cryer, I think we'll see more of those skills. But I certainly think those two beat expectations today.
So they were up big from the beginning. We knew that was going to happen. You mentioned in a couple of your responses, buy stock in Dale Bonner, great control. Keontae George, I think everyone will expect him to be the guy that scores a lot. But, again, this is an unselfish team, and there's a lot of others who can shoot as well and score. What about him did you like the most other than what he can do with a basketball in his hands as far as shooting?
I think it's all defensively, Smokey. Sometimes his tape at IMG, it would feel like at times he might take a play off or two defensively because it was about getting buckets, scoring, because he's such a dominant scorer. Some of that might reflect with how well he worked his body over the summer. He credited when I talked to him at Big 12 Media Days how Charlie Melton, Baylor's director of strength and performance, had really helped him out. And then he'd gone to a bunch of different camps over the summer, like Chris Paul's camp, and that's a really easy opportunity to eat poorly. Like, I'm going to be in Vegas next week for Baylor in the Continental Tires Classic. I can tell you right now, I'm going to eat a buffet at Harris. I'm going to eat a steak dinner. I'm going to get Canes at 4 a.m. Now they got Raising Canes in Las Vegas. So really credit to him as a freshman that he has the discipline and presence of mind to not go crazy eating when he's traveling, because I'm going to tell you fellas right now, I'm going to be 15 pounds heavier when I come back from Vegas.
Kendall, this team is going to be very offensively driven, but you know that Scott Drew and his staff really focus on defense. Do you think that, not that they can be Davion Mitchell good, because that guy's kind of in a class all his own, but they can be on that level defensively as they were a couple years ago?
I think they can be one tier below that, Paul. I've set the barometer. Can they be a top 20 defense? Because I think the offense will be so dominant. Nobody as good as Davion Mitchell, as you mentioned, Paul. Nobody as good as Mark Vidal. And then Jared Butler and Maceo Teague, I thought were top 30 defenders in the sport by the end of the season. But you see how well Adam Flagler looked. We saw today how Keontae George was willing to take 2 charges where somebody's going to pay me $10 million in a contract the next season. I may not want to take that charge. And then Josh O had a few moments today where he looked a little out of position, but he was so skilled switching on the guards in the perimeter that you see why in a couple of years he's going to be an NBA player. So I think the defense lines up to be over that top 20 mark. I don't think it will be as dominant as Baylor's defense was 2 years ago, but I think at its apex, that defense was the best defense. As Seth Greenberg has said in the past, he's joined your all's program quite a few times. That was maybe the best defense since UNLV in the early 90s, but I think this is a tier below it. It could legitimately and literally be a top 10 defense this season.
Is the decision by D'Antoine Grimes, the Kilgore College transfer, is this just because of a numbers game at his position?
I think it is, Smokey. You look at clearly the three guards that started would be above him. Dale Bonner was what we saw today. And then Langston Love had some good moments today. I think his knee will only improve throughout the season. So if you look at it and you're Grimes, is it better for you to play 2 seasons from now or maybe only get mop-up duty this season? It takes some wherewithal and kind of knowing where you are in the rotation to be okay with as good as he was in Canada, saying, you know what, I'm probably not going to beat out these other guys, but watch out for me in 2 years. So I do think it was a numbers game, Smokey.
All right, we cannot let you go, and thank you for your time on the men's basketball team, and we'll have you on more than you're going to want to hear from us. But you, early before the season began, you were not at all high on Oklahoma football. You thought that there would be a drop. Obviously, there has been. You, even when you gave your prediction last week, said that this game was personal, like you were playing nose tackle or right guard. Your thoughts about the Oklahoma game and also Baylor and how they took care of business?
Smokey, I would say the subprime mortgage crisis, me asking out women that are out of my league, and parking my car in places that I'm going to be towed. I have a wherewithal for knowing when disaster is going to strike or when catastrophe is coming to people or institutions or life. And something just struck me about Oklahoma this season, that they had a new quarterback. Their defense lost a ton of guys. And Lincoln Riley was a phenomenal coach. Every OU fan likes to pretend he wasn't an incredible coach at Oklahoma. Clearly he was, getting Oklahoma consistently in the playoff. Yes, they weren't nearly as good as those SEC teams, but guess what? You're going to be even worse than those SEC teams now that you get to go face them. So a lot of great Oklahoma fans, a lot of great people at OU. I enjoy Oklahoma basketball. But all I'm saying is I knew disaster was coming. I knew they didn't have Lincoln Riley anymore. I knew their fans were ridiculous this summer when I pointed this out. And so, you know, some would say a better man wouldn't gloat right now, but I'm not a better man. It's not a new year right now. I wish the Oklahoma fans would wake up and realize that their best days are behind them. Fans of the Roman Empire in 475 AD had to know collapse was coming. In 1990 in the Soviet Union, you had to be prepared to know that the Eastern Bloc was going to stop being communist and go a different direction. And I'm telling OU fans right now, the era of OU football is past. It's time to get a new hobby. I tried to warn you all, and I'm sorry you didn't listen to me.
Baylor won by 3, Kendall.
I'm not, Smokey, I'm not saying Baylor's a playoff contender by any stretch. I'm just taking my lick with Oklahoma right now.
I know you are.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was.
He went down the history line. Right?
It was just that you said that there could be trouble on the horizon, and then I did think the funny thing was people going, "You've obviously never heard of Jeff Lebby." Like, well, that's not even. And just to put it in perspective, it's not even fair to Jeff Lebby to be like, "Well, he'll fix all the problems that they could have."
No, and I think he's done a pretty nice job there, Paul, this season. Obviously, I didn't see a tweet about 6 after 6 this season. I didn't see that tweet. I don't know. Maybe I just missed. I don't follow him on Twitter. I didn't see that tweet. But I don't think he's the reason why they're kind of headed into the toilet right now. I think it's that Oklahoma had some advantages. People have caught up to them, and now they're heading to a conference where people have more advantages in Oklahoma, and they're entering that conference at the exact time that they're getting kind of terrible at some of these sports, kind of the same way Mizzou was trending downward in football as they headed toward the SEC. So, you know, I hope Oklahoma has this day in the future that they can prove me wrong. They just haven't proved me wrong at all this season, but, you know, maybe next year's their year. It hasn't been their year in 22 years at the football level. And I think the last time they made the Final Four in basketball, they lost by 35 to Villanova. But there's always the next decade, I guess, for the Sooners.
All right, Kendall. Craig, anything you want to add to that? Thank you very much for your time. Kendall Kaut, I'll give you his home number and address here in a moment if you're from the state of Oklahoma. Yeah, that was it was a competitive game, but OU is obviously, it's just something we haven't seen really in a long, long time since back before Stoops began. And, you know, it looked like they kind of turned the corner. They did. It was competitive, but they still have to finish games off and get one more win to get to a bowl game.
I mean, the two topics, the way he's coming at it are kind of, you know, different, or not even the way he's coming at it. I mean, the loss to Baylor is one thing on Saturday. The rest of that's another thing entirely. Now, one might be a symptom of the other, but, I mean, yeah, Baylor played better. Baylor had 3 first-half turnovers, and Baylor won by a field goal, you know, when all was said and done. So that was not anywhere close to the best Oklahoma team that we've seen in recent years. And yet, you know, they were still sitting there with an opportunity to win that game. Now, as to his other, like, so here's where I am. I think Brent Venables is a fine head coach for right now. I really don't know what to expect and how quickly to expect it moving forward because the SEC wild card just throws everything for a loop. If they were sticking around in the Big 12, then I could confidently say, like, yeah, just give them a little bit of time. They'll be fine. Just give them like a recruiting class or two, transfer portal, and they'll be back in no time. But, you go from an era where you had Heisman quarterback after Heisman quarterback after Heisman quarterback. Like, you don't just lose that and then just like, this guy was better or is better. It's like, no, you don't just overcome that right away and that quickly, no matter if you go get Dylan Gabriel or not. I mean, they were